USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, December 5th, 2022. Each week we look back at the highlights of the weekend and the news of the week. This podcast is sponsored by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org, membership required. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Well, gentlemen, I can tell just by our conversation before starting, we're all a bit fired up today, and there's a lot to talk about.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's hit the ground running here. Let's start out with number one, Denver, surviving on Friday, a late goal that had some reviews, multiple reviews versus Arizona State, more of a cruise to a 5-2 win on Saturday. But boy, we've been texting back and forth over the weekend and talking to multiple sources and looking at video. It's not something that I just pulled out of my backside, unlike a commenter on USCHO.com suggests. We've been doing some homework on this. The Denver game-winning goal on Friday was fraught with controversy because of the situation that happened to put the goal in. Originally, no goal on ice. Then after review, awarded a goal. Lots of stuff happened. Why don't we recap what happened and then talk a little bit about how to understand it?
Well, let's start with the play in itself. A puck goes high in the air. I mean, we're now talking probably 2 feet above shoulder level, maybe 1.5 feet, when both an ASU defender and a Denver attacker both swat at the puck. The Denver player is using his stick to swat at the puck. The ASU player is using his glove to swat at the puck. A call on the ice was no goal. So they go to video review upon a challenge by Denver coach David Carl. He was saying that the stick never touched the puck, that it went off the glove and in. And when the referees looked at the angle, that was what they determined. They said that the puck went off the glove and not off the stick. We've now seen multiple angles. We've had Coach Greg Powers sending us some clips. I've talked to Steve Petrowski, who's the head of Big Ten officials. He didn't have the officials on the game, but he works with Arizona State because they're an independent. He helps them with their officiating. So there's a lot of sides to this. I know Schools. Why don't you give a little bit of your thoughts, and then I'll come back with what I got from Steve Petrowski, and we can kind of sum things up that way.
Well, I obviously spoke with Greg last night. I knew we were going to hit this one fairly hard. Pretty big controversy. That's a big. If that would have got to overtime for Arizona State, that's a big. Some PairWise credit they're getting. I know we're going to get into PairWise, but that's a missed opportunity for them. And they're pretty good at 3-on-3 overtime, as Minnesota saw the week before, especially on the road. So that's another whole different scenario behind it. I think after talking with Greg, they had issues with the officiating all week. There was an embellishment call earlier in the game. There was a replay that they couldn't have, was not functional on Saturday. So they had issues with everything. So I'm prefacing my statements that I'm getting it through Arizona State's point of view. To me, it looked like the puck hit the glove, but it also looked like the stick, while also swatting at the puck, caused the glove to direct it into the net. So technically, probably could have been a slash or high stick, because the stick was over the net, which then caused the puck to go in the net. Now, then, is that last touch by Arizona State, where then it's an own goal? There's a whole bunch of different layers to this. I thought it should have been no goal. I know Greg has had some conversations through the NHL people that he's shared it with that it would not have counted in the National Hockey League. Once again, their opinion. I don't see how you could slash somebody's glove and cause the puck to go in the net, whether it's a slash, whether it's a high stick, whether it's up in the air, and it be counted. So I'm probably, I bet you if you polled 100 coaches on this, you would probably have a 50-50 goal or no goal, my opinion. Oh, I know, Jimmy, you went right to the referees. You've You've also got the same videos I've got. You've also texted with Greg. You've done a lot on this, but I think there's a bigger issue as far as replays that I know we'll get into more as we talk here.
Yeah, so I did talk to Steve Petrowski, who is the head of the Big Ten officials. He also was the longtime rules editor for the NCAA. So if you want to talk about a guy that knows the rule book inside out and backwards, it's Pi. He's fantastic at it, and he was kind enough to share almost a half hour of his time last night talking about this. And to the points that you made, and he agreed with the overturning of the call. He believed that it looked kind of clear that the glove hit it. I brought up the fact that what you did, that the glove was hit by the stick, which pushes it in. He said that that's immaterial. He said that it's the similar thing if a defender has his skate next to the puck and the attacking player kicks the defender's skate, and then the defender's skate knocks the puck in the net, that would be a good goal because he didn't directly kick the puck. Same thing here. The stick didn't directly hit the puck. So according to Pi, that the goal would stand for that reason. And then you go back to the issue you just had, the slash. It could be a slash or it could be a high stick. We've talked about this before in college hockey. You can't add a penalty, a minor penalty, on video review. So because there was no call on the ice for either a slash or a high stick, you couldn't add that unless it was a major. So, and as Pi said, this did not grow to the level of a major. Now, after talking with Pi, I texted back and forth with Greg Powers, and he sent me another angle, and it did appear in that angle that it was a little inconclusive whether it was the glove or the stick that was hitting the puck. And if that's the case, then the call on the ice probably should have stood. So I've been kind of going back and forth on this. Talking to obviously a well-respected official on this, I get his opinion, but then I look at it myself and I say, maybe it was the stick that hit it. The whole issue that I had was looking at that extra camera angle. That camera looked like it was put in place in 1999. And that's one of the biggest issues I have with the video review system right now, is that building to building, league to league, day to day, you have varying levels of how good video review systems are. There is no standard. And I understand there's a huge amount of cost that goes with this. And Derek, you and I were talking off the air. I said, if somebody said to your program you had to spend $150,000 to upgrade your video review system, would that be a showstopper? You said, yes, it's a lot of money that universities don't have to spend. I get that. But we try to rely so heavily on this video review system. They've put in systems, put in a penalty now. If you're incorrect twice in a game, or you're incorrect when you don't have a timeout left, you can get a minor penalty. I realize that it's the system as much as anything. I will never blame the referees on this stuff because they are given the tools to work with, and these tools are not well functioning. And last year we harped on the fact that the NCAA went in and revised their whole statistical system and spent tons of money on this NCAA live stats. I think they should have spent all of that money on standardizing video review in NCAA hockey. Anything that was spent in hockey should have gone to video review because that is more germane to the game. That affects the game. Whoever has good stats, the stat system was working perfectly, as we've noted many times in this podcast. So I think that if you're really looking at where the NCAA is prioritizing, if you want to spend money, spend it on video review, because that really does, as we saw in this situation, really can impact outcomes of games.
And it can impact outcomes of the national tournament eventually.
Correct. Yeah.
It could impact a lot of different things. But I will say in this scenario, you asked me specifically, would your school? I gave you the answers. I think you'll be shocked at the amount of schools and the name of the schools that would say, no way, we're not spending $150,000 on standardizing video. And I think it's probably some big time schools that would go, no, we won't do that. It's just fine the way it is. And really, it does impact the game. I mean, we talked, we were also, when we were off the air, there's black spots at rinks where you're told before the game, and I won't bring up the rinks, that you cannot challenge in this area because you probably won't be able to see because there's no camera angle from dot to boards across from your bench. Don't challenge there because you will lose. And I said, well, if I challenge here and you can't see it, do I still get my timeout back? No, we warned you in advance. There's so many different things like that happens from rink to rink, building to building, day to day. I mean, one day, Arizona State's getting a goal counted. Then the next day they go to challenge it, and the replay system is not operational. The actual referee came out and said the replay system is not operational, so we have a good goal. I mean, where are you at with that? I mean, I think, like I said, Arizona State, whether it's a coach's challenge, I think they got the replay shaft this weekend.
Well, a couple of things I want to rewind back on a little bit. First of all, if it was called no goal on the ice like it was in that late goal on Friday, it's got to be conclusive to overturn it. And it doesn't seem as if that was conclusive. So in that case, it should default back to that. Back to the issue of replay and cameras. Even within some leagues, they don't have the same replay system from rink to rink.
Different companies.
Yeah, different companies. And from one arena to another, you have different levels of training for the off-ice officials. I know that there are some places where when the referees get there, the video is queued up and ready for them so that they know what to look at. Others, they go in and say what they want to be able to see. There's misinformation around there. I would start, first of all, conference by conference. Every conference should standardize what they have in their buildings. And if you have a budget of $20,000, you do the $20,000 budget. You do what you can budget, and you make sure the officials who work almost entirely in that league have the same system and the same, at least minimum number of camera angles installed. And if that means you've got to put up a blue line camera, if that means you've got to install an overhead camera, you do it, but you've got to go to that extent. But I agree with you. They've got, and on non-operational, I've seen this in games too. Within a game, when there's a call on the host site, the camera's not working. When it's a call on the other team, oh, we got it working again. I've seen that go back and forth in games. And that's, that needs to be looked into by the leagues. But, we have various levels of management capabilities from league to league. But in any case, yeah, they've got to fix this problem. They do in all levels.
As a coach, Ed, you're being told at times the referee will skate over and say, just so you know, the replay system's down right now. And they'll tell you that. And then maybe 5 minutes later, they'll tell you the replay system's back up. And you're just crossing your fingers that something doesn't happen during that time. So you've got, and like I said, different companies. I could name 3 different companies just within Atlantic Hockey that we've met with, all 3 that have teams have video systems within our buildings, because we met with them when we were installing them. We still have it. There's the one out of Erie that does Mercyhurst. There's DV Sport. There's XOs. And I'm sure there's some other ones that I'm forgetting. So everybody has different replay capabilities, and they're not all the same. And they just left it to each school instead of the conference saying, here's where we're going with. And it's that way within different leagues too. It is. It's not just Atlantic Hockey. Every league has something different. And it's unfortunate because this is I hope that this does not affect anything down the road as far as PairWise, as far as all that, because that could be a shame. Now, do they win that game? Do they give up a goal a minute later? Who knows? So,
yeah. Everything changes when that call changes. So you don't know how the game plays out. But this feels like something that is not an exact science, but it should be closer to an exact science than we make it. And when I say we, it's a collective we of the NCAA, of all of the conferences, of all of the member schools. There's got to be something done to improve the video review system. I don't know where the onus lies. Is it on the conferences to start? And as you made the point, I think that's a good start. Does the NCAA need to come down and do something? Does there need to be more of an investment in the sport from some level? And how do you get that investment made? I don't know, but it does feel like there's a broken system. And I've seen it. Even if you're not seeing problems with it. When you talk about review systems that are inconsistent, that also changes the flow of the game. You might have a video review that should take 60 seconds at most, and you find out that the officials are in there for 7-8 minutes because they're not even seeing anything. They're looking at a blank screen because people don't know how to operate the system. They don't know how to queue up the replay. They don't know what they're looking for. It's so confusing. And so it's something that needs investment because it's so material to the game. Something I was talking to Pi about last night. He said when video review started, it was a little tiny section in the rule book. And now it's multiple pages because you've realized there's more things that need to be included that you can review. And every time you see something, you're always saying, hey, can we review that? Can we review that? And you add it. And now there's so many things within a game that can be reviewed. It's so material to the outcome of these games. It deserves more attention and certainly more investment.
And the investment number, the cost of doing video in general keeps coming down. I know it's expensive to get it on a lift and maybe install some stuff, but the software in video, there should be an economical way to do it. And maybe that economical number is still big, like 50,000, but it seems that as technology's improved, it should be easier to come up with a system that everybody can use.
The funny thing is I keep coming up with points and thinking of things, and then you forget them because we could talk a whole show on this. I mean, it is important. It is an important aspect of the game. And, we go through the whole thing. We haven't even touched, and this is where I was going with it. We haven't touched on the fact that it was a no goal on the ice, challenged by Denver, re-challenged by Arizona State. We've got and then what would happen if they would have waved it off? Then Denver, because they didn't lose their timeout before because their challenge is right, could Denver have challenged again? I mean, what are we like? I've never seen that. This was a 15-minute process. Like you said, I mean, it was no goal on the ice, review, talk to both coaches, another challenge, review, talk to both coaches. I mean,
yeah, that was a game with a lot of pace to it. So it ground to a halt with less than 2 minutes to go in regulation. And that's another issue. But I think we've hammered this one to death. But we come out with we all come up with the same conclusion, is that video review needs better implementation and attention.
Well, why don't we get to what happened on the ice over the weekend? Denver.
Oh, do we not? We probably need a break now, don't we? Holy God. After this, we need to take a deep breath.
This is only half of point number 1 in segment A, so we got a ways to go here. How legitimate is Denver now? We were all questioning. A lot of people were questioning after they got swept at UMass. 10-2 since then. Number 1 team last week. Going to be number 1 in the poll this week, almost certainly. We're recording before the poll is tabulated. But Denver, pretty good team.
Yeah, no doubt. And I don't want anything to get lost in this. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Pioneers. Arizona State gave them a great game on Friday, but then Denver, jumped out to a 4-0 lead on Saturday, and they played some really good hockey. And they're proving how strong they can be in a good conference in the NCHC. There's not a lot of nights off in that conference. So, and I've been impressed even with their non-league schedule. They have some tough opponents on their non-league schedule. So the way that they're playing right now, that weekend way back in October against UMass now looks more like an aberration than the constant. They are a better team than they showed that weekend, and they've proven it since then.
I guess we all agree. That was easy. Quinnipiac, they had wins on both their ECAC games over the weekend, with Harvard losing to Colgate. Quinnipiac is now the only unbeaten team in ECAC play, 8-0, 12-1-3 overall. They are going to be in the top 3 in the poll, and they're in the top 3 in our discussion. How about Quinnipiac?
Yeah, I mean, we had them both. All 3 of us talked about them being number 1 last week, and I don't think that changes. I think they're in the top. Maybe Denver's wins this weekend were a little bit more impressive than theirs, probably to hold on to the number 1, but they're there for a reason. There was some good hockey played in the ECAC this weekend. That Cornell Harvard game, what an outstanding game. The atmosphere at Liner Rink. Then Obviously, Harvard comes back down to earth with a loss at Colgate, and then obviously you get a split. Cornell gets a split with scoring 2 goals on the weekend. I mean, that's a challenge, and they only gave up 2 goals. I mean, so you look at it both ways. So a lot of good hockey played in the ECAC, and obviously Quinnipiac leading the way.
Yeah, I'm really impressed. Rand Pecknold has this team going, and I was looking because we mentioned, I don't know if we've mentioned in this show, but we've mentioned on other podcasts. Rand Pecknold will be heading off to World Juniors and coaching World Juniors. I said, how will that affect his team? Then I looked at the schedule, and there's a possibility he might only miss one game, and it's a game at Holy Cross, I think, on December 30th. The way that the schedule works out is that he might be back for the next 2 games, because the gold medal game would be the day before. He'd be flying quickly and trying to get back on the bench. But I think he trusts his assistant coaches, obviously. But, I always worry when a head coach leaves a team for any amount of time. But I don't actually worry about Quinnipiac here. They are a machine, and they are rolling through this league. 8-0 in ECAC play. They're 12-1-3 overall. Those are impressive numbers as you're almost at the break, and they are just cruising.
And you got Joe Dume, who's been there forever.
Yeah.
You got Mike Corbett, who was a head coach at Alabama Huntsville, worked at Air Force. I mean, they're not going to miss a beat without Rand there. Sometimes it loosens you up a little bit too, not to have the head coach there and things like that. So it's almost like taking a day off of practice. The guys are a little bit more looser, and I don't think they'll want to disappoint, the 2 assistant coaches. So
right.
I think they'll be fine with Joe and Mike.
Although I will say that game at Holy Cross on December 30th, don't forget that's Bill Riga. That's Rand's old associate head coach. Holy Cross will be hungry to try to get a win in that one.
And you never know which Holy Cross team is going to show up. They just came off a sweep at Air Force, and not an easy task to go out there and sweep. Derek, isn't this the time of year when the players are tired of hearing from you anyway?
Yeah, I think, you end up starting to take a few days off as a head coach. You'll let the assistants usually run Monday, maybe take a day off. You want them to hear you on the weekends, and you let the assistants do a little bit more. Your systems are all in. You've done the video. I think this is the time where that's a very good point, that you do want to kind of back off a little bit as a head coach and make sure your message is coming in on Fridays and Saturdays comparatively. I want to win Friday, Saturday, Monday. To me, I'm not gonna lose my team on Monday for on Friday and Saturday.
Let's turn to Minnesota. I readily admit I thought that Michigan State might pull out a split out of this weekend, the way the Spartans have been playing, and they're still playing well. And they put up 40 shots on Saturday in a 6-3 loss, a 5-0 win, 3rd shutout for Justin Close. How good is Minnesota? I was starting to say, well, maybe after that Arizona State weekend, but how good are they now?
Well, I mean, first of all, Arizona State was overtime, but I watched that. I had that game on because it started earlier than everybody else on Friday night at 6:00, and genius by the Big Ten to filling their times. You got a first hour of that being the only hockey game on the Big Ten network. And that was a Minnesota game right from the get-go. Logan Cooley scored early, and then they just piled on a little bit, obviously, and that just set the tone for the weekend. I think you're seeing that they're establishing themselves as the cream of the crop of the Big Ten right now. They're kind of expanding their lead a little bit. You see Michigan go out to Wisconsin and lose a game. There's some things that top to bottom within the Big Ten that can really shake up things. And I know we'll talk about the PairWise, but it's an interesting conference right now. But I think you're seeing Minnesota become the front runner right now, without a doubt.
I have been critical of Minnesota at times this year, and I probably have been overcritical because I think that I know this is a good team. It's just, it's always the living up to expectations issue. And I the one thing I realize is that Bob Motzko does a pretty good job of getting his team to peak at the right point, and they're starting now. if you're starting in December, I know you got to take a break here soon in your season, but you're going to come back and you're going to feel a little bit of momentum. And then it's really about that January, February stretch. Every coach tells you that. So if they're starting to play their best hockey now and starting to go up from here, they still have room for growth. I know that. And I think that's a good sign for Minnesota. They're a fantastic team right now.
They can't take a step back this weekend at home against Wisconsin.
True. And Wisconsin is playing good hockey right now. So you got to be careful.
The border battle, yep. You got that history. That's going to be big. And this is almost like a little rivalry week. You got Michigan State as well. And, Michigan State's going to want to be hungry to show Michigan that they're back. So it's going to be interesting in the Big Ten this weekend.
Before we go to the break, I want to throw in one more team that we seem to keep forgetting, flying under our radar a little bit. They swept North Dakota at home in St. Cloud for the first time in 21 years. How about St. Cloud? And on the other side of things, what about North Dakota right now?
St. Cloud's flying. I mean, and they're playing really good hockey every night. They fell behind one of the games this weekend. I think was it 3-0 and then came back and won it going away. I mean, that's pretty impressive. North Dakota, I'm concerned about North Dakota. They're still, we're going to get into the PairWise next segment. I think they're still 22 in the PairWise. So it's not like they're, sitting down in the 40s and have no chance unless they win their conference. But there's reason for concern there. They've got to find a way to get things back together. They're maybe welcoming the break. I don't know what the injury situation is out there right now. And I'm always try to be cautious when I'm, taking teams that I have high expectations for and saying that they're not meeting them. I don't know how healthy they are, but if they're healthy, then there's really a big red flag. If they're healthy, there's a big red flag here.
North Dakota has given up 6 goals in 4 games already this season, and their goaltending is well under 900 as a whole.
And they don't, it's not easy for them in the NCHC coming up here. They've got Western Michigan, then they go on break. And like you said, maybe they get healthy, maybe they're not. Then they come back and they've got the development program, Lindenwood, and then back in league again with Western Michigan. I mean, if those 4 NCHC games go south, the last thing you're going to want to think about is the NODAC controversy. I mean, it could go south in a hurry. They need to right the ship in a quick fashion.
Well, we're going to take a break and we're going to talk PairWise. It's finally that time of year. USCHO Weekend Review is sponsored by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
Sometimes it's not about wanting a new car, it's about needing one. And I needed one I could rely on. So I got an auto loan with DCU. They offer the same low rates on both new and used cars, and I was able to borrow a little extra to make a used car as good as new. My auto loan from DCU means a ride I can finally rely on, which feels like a pretty big thing. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
Welcome back to USCHO Weekend Review. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. We talk a lot in the early season about how the PairWise doesn't mean much early on. Once you get into December, it starts to take shape. And Jim, as you've pointed out, once you get to January 1st, a lot of the teams are already locked into the tournament.
Yeah, looking through some data for about the last 10 years, it's actually more than 80% of the at-large qualifiers have been in the top 15 of the PairWise by January 1. So if you're not in that position, it doesn't mean you can't get into it. And obviously there's conference tournaments to be won and all that sort of stuff. But if you're not at least kind of in the bubble range, if you're not in that top 22, 23 range by January 1, you have so much work to do. I'm not saying that it can happen, but your chances start getting into the lower than 20% to get into the tournament as an at-large. So you have to kind of take that into consideration as you look at the PairWise. And I do think that this is a fair time to start looking at it. Everybody has played at least 10 games. That's for the Ivies. That's, close to half their schedule. They get 27 games. So 10 is more than a third. every team's well past the 1/3 point of their season, and most teams have played a good portion of their out of conference schedule. You don't have many teams, except for obviously the independents, that have much more than 3 or 4 non-conference games remaining. So that's why I feel at this point it makes sense to start talking about the pairwise. We can start looking at it and following it week by week.
Oh, you're gonna start pulling out all the math stuff and lose me and algorithms and everything. And I mean,
we're gonna try to do this qualitatively and not quantitatively here.
I don't even know what those words mean.
You just lost schools. Those 2 words. Come on, Ed.
All right, we're not going to look at the numbers. We're going to look at where people are and what we can do from that. I want to bring up a couple of things that are an impact on this, but right now we see 6 teams from Hockey East in the top 16, 5 from the Big Ten, 2 in the ECAC, 2 in the NCHC, surprising, and 1 team in the CCHA. Now, I want to bring up a couple of things on that. First of all, what about Minnesota State? They got swept by Ferris over the weekend. That really pushed the Mavericks down and out. But Hockey East, one of the things that's really interesting to me about Hockey East is some teams in the league have played as many as 13 conference games, others as few as 8. And when you start playing more and more teams in your league, you start to settle in on a record of all the teams in your league converging closer to 500. Okay, there's a little math there, but things are going to settle out a little bit in Hockey East as there's more play within the league. So I don't think you're going to see 6 Hockey East teams in the tournament. I don't think you're going to only see 2 NCHC teams in the tournament. Things are going to level out there. But right now, that's looking very good for Hockey East. CCHA has had 2 or 3 teams in. I think it was 3 in that year, Derek, when you were on the committee, and you guys didn't have advantage of the numbers. But we'll probably see a couple from there, but none from Atlantic Hockey. The highest one is RIT around number 19 or 20 in the tie in that position right now. How do you look at that? I mean, talking about Hockey East, Merrimack at number 6. Are the Warriors going to be able to hang on to that?
6 is pretty high for right now, and that's you can drop quickly. I get it. You can lose 3 or 4 in a row and drop, but that's really high, and you're in good position. I think you're right. It's going to be difficult for Hockey East to hang on to 6 now. Even if it is 6 or goes down to 5. Which of the 6? You look at Northeastern as one of. I think they were the preseason favorite in the league. They're not even in the top 16. They're not even close. I think they're down around 22, 23 right now. 25. So they're kind of even below the bubble. They've got some work still to do. The Big Ten is actually the league, and it shouldn't shock me because they have a really high out of conference winning percentage. I think somewhere around 750. That's 3 out of every 4 non-conference games they're winning. They have 5 out of their 7 teams in right now. If the season ended today, I mean that's impressive for one thing. You're right, Ed, that there will be, I call it cannibalization. The more leagues you play in the league games you play in the second half, you start to cannibalize one another. You start to play each other. Sweeps really go a long way in the second half of the year once you've put yourself in a good position in the pairwise, or if you're trying to get back into a good position, those 2-game weekend sweeps, taking 5 out of 6 points in a weekend, that usually means a win and a tie. There's a lot of good things that can still happen in terms of where you can move and where you can stay, but it splits are not. You want splits. You talk about that, schools like at on the road. You want to split. At home, you want to get a little bit more than 3 of the 6 points. But if you can start sweeping series, you can move quickly up and you can really, really solidify your position. So a team like a Merrimack, a team like UConn, which right now is sitting at 8, Boston University at 7, like those teams, and look even further up, like Penn State at 5, Minnesota is 1 right now in the pairwise. Those teams can put a few sweeps together in the second half of the season against league opponents, and they can just kind of write their NCAA ticket.
Is Michigan Tech are they going to go on a little bit of a run and start distancing themselves a little bit and put themselves as the one team from the CCHA? Because really after that, your next one, I think is Bemidji at 24.
Right.
So for them to get 2 teams, they're going to have to get Michigan Tech as high up as they can and then hope somebody beats them unless something really kind of changes the way that league's going. Same thing with Atlantic Hockey. RIT goes on a massive run. But anytime you have those one losses, those can really hurt you. And you look at it, and I remember we started talking about it one time. We were at like 10, and we lost to somebody, and next thing you know, we were at 18 on one loss because it was a bad loss. And, Harvard, the two ECAC teams, Quinnipiac is obviously going to be in a really good spot. But where does Harvard play? If you start losing down on the road to a Yale at 61, Ivy League matchup, Harvard, Yale, emotion. And then next thing you're dropping. I mean, those are things that legitimately can happen to the CCHA or ECAC. And I'm not a math guy. I'm just looking and knowing how it works and how I've seen it work. But those two could really be on the outside if something not weird, if just hockey happened.
Well, it's really the math that determines that kind of stuff, and to break it down into non-math terms.
I thought that's what I did.
Well, I'm just going to amplify what you said and agree and explain a little more why what you said was exactly right. If you're a team in a league like right now this year, CCHA or Atlantic Hockey or ECAC, where your overall out-of-conference winning percentage is low, that means the strength of schedule for those teams in the league is going to be lower. So you need a higher winning percentage to balance off about your lower strength of schedule. And so a loss affecting your winning percentage impacts you a lot more than it does if you're a team with a really strong schedule. And that's why they create the RPI the way it is. So you're exactly right. So you can have some bad losses in there. You can have some good wins. If you win, or even if you just split, say you take on a team that's in the top 10 in the PairWise and has a strong strength of schedule, you get the advantage of some of that added to you, and a win or even a split there is important and gives you a lot of buoyancy in the PairWise. So yeah, that's exactly right. You mentioned Northeastern. That loss to Union over the weekend hurt them badly.
It really does drop them. I mean, you're looking at Union. I'm trying to actually locate them right now in the PairWise.
32,
and they were probably lower before that victory over Northeastern, but that one really does hurt Northeastern. And this is a team that I've called a bunch of Northeastern games, and they've got a great goaltender. They've got some phenomenal forwards and even a couple of good blue liners. They're not playing up to snuff right now. One game over 500, but they also have a lot of hockey ahead of them. They've only played 14 out of their 34 games. They have 20 games left to play. So there's going to be opportunity where you can put a couple of weekends together, but you do have to kind of caution. You've got teams in Hockey East that if you were to drop a game, and I don't want to pick on anybody, but I'm looking at some of the teams that are toward the bottom, like Vermont or UNH. You lose to any of those teams, even with the strong strength of schedule for Hockey East, those can be devastating losses because one loss can pull your RPI down so significantly, particularly if it comes at home. There are teams, if you're inside the bubble right now, if you're kind of inside that 10 range, you just have to continue to play consistent hockey. If you're between 11 and 15, you know that you have a good shot of making the NCAA tournament, but one bad loss can drop you like a lead balloon. And if you're now below that 15 point, you've got some work to do. And the second half is still there for you. There's plenty of opportunity, but you don't have as much leeway. And we always say you can't, win a national championship. You can't qualify yourself in the first month of the season, but you can definitely put yourself in a position where it's going to be difficult to get there. I've seen teams do it. I can remember, Lowell's team in 2013 that went to the Frozen Four, I believe was 3 or 4 games under 500 when they got to the Christmas break. Nobody was even talking about them. Then I think they lost 2 games for the rest of the regular season in Hockey East tournament and qualified as a number 1 seed. So you can go to those points, but those are the aberrations. You don't want to be putting yourself in a position where you have to go on a 20-2 run after New Year's.
To follow up on both of your points, we did buy or sell last week with Niagara. They dropped 6 spots after losing 1 game to Army. And that also still hurts Omaha. And Omaha had a good weekend. I don't know how much they climbed. because obviously, the reason Omaha is still able to be where they're at is the fact that Niagara is doing very well. Those losses really don't kill them that bad. But any time that Niagara loses a game to somebody that's a little bit lower, that takes a little bite out of Omaha.
But as the season goes on and they play more in the NCHC, those bites get smaller and smaller.
Right.
Well, let's talk about bubble teams, and I want to include Omaha in that. 5 teams right around the bubble: Notre Dame, Western Michigan, Cornell, RIT, and Omaha. Each of these teams have different situations. RIT has very little room for error if they want to stay anywhere near that, whereas Notre Dame, Western Michigan, and Omaha, because of the strengths of their leagues, a couple of good weekends can put them right back in the mix. Cornell, maybe not as much. They got off to a slow start, and the ECAC is not as strong. So you've got really 3 bands there. You've got good position, tenuous position, and dangerous position for those bubble teams.
Well, I will go with RIT right off the bat. You brought them up. We're going to know exactly where they stand at probably sometime on New Year's Eve. That's that you're going to be able to determine if RIT has an at-large opportunity. That's after 2 games with Penn State. If they can do well in those games, then I think you're going to see them have that opportunity. If they get 2 wins, holy cow! Watch them climb and then run it out, and there's your opportunity for 2 Atlantic hockey teams.
And one of those games, the first of those 2 games, is at home for RIT. It's a home-and-home series, very uncharacteristic for Penn State's non-conference scheduling to go on the road like that.
Have you been sitting in my meetings? I'll leave it at that.
So those bubble teams, anything to add to what I said? I mean, Western Michigan, that was a tough weekend for them, but these are teams that can bounce back when they get into league play or maybe wrap up whatever remaining non-conference games are hanging out there.
Yeah, I guess the team that has it's now below kind of where we're even talking about as a bubble is Minnesota State. They're the most concerning. I think that they have a quality victory over Minnesota on their resume, but they still have a little bit to find their legs again. They've really been struggling of late, and 2 losses against Ferris this week really brought them down. They have a climb. I mean, that's 27. You're talking about moving up more than 10 spots, more than 12 spots, possibly as many, having to move up as many as 14, depending on how conference tournaments go. So this is a team that's been perennially, number 1 seed in the tournament of recent years. And they're showing the effects of some of their losses in the off season.
And I'll go one step further with my alma mater in Western Michigan. We talked about those 4 games against North Dakota. Those are pretty big when you think.
They could be, but they've so much ahead of them in the NCHC. They've got plenty of weekends that can pull them up.
But if you throw the middle games in there, their last non-conference games, the GLI, the revised GLI
right
in Grand Rapids with Michigan Tech and Michigan State. Those are some pairwise implications in there. And you got Ferris, who's in that, which just made a pretty decent climb after beating Minnesota State, like you said. So there's some games there that, yes, they have the ability to climb, but there's some important 6 games there too.
Anybody who's a little bit below the bubble that we haven't mentioned, besides Minnesota State, who we did, that are not in the top 20, but could be or should be a tournament team?
Bowling Green's my curious one. They're not that far off the bubble, down to 23. And they are sitting right at 500 right now, 8-8, a lot of games still to play. They don't have a lot of room for error, but if they go on a little bit of a run, they pull themselves up. Bowling Green, they have enough on their resume at this point that they're not as an 8-8 team. You're talking, we have teams that are 10-8. Northern Michigan's down at 32. We have Sacred Heart at 7-1. They're at 36. There are teams, Minnesota Duluth at 8-8, same record in NCHC team. They're 39th in the pairwise with the same record. So the Bowling Green's resume right now is pretty decent. So what they have to do is just play some good hockey in the second half and pull themselves up. They have the resume already. Whereas the same team, Minnesota Duluth, we know that they're going to get some real quality opponents here in the second half. if they win those games, maybe they'll pull themselves up, but they have a bigger climb, a much bigger climb, significantly bigger climb to get up from 38 at this point.
And I'm going to go back to obviously Arizona State, where they've proven they're a good hockey team. They're at, I think, right around 28-ish. I don't have it right now because I just pulled up their schedule. 29. But they go to UNH and that's after this weekend at UNH, they only have 4 games left on the road. 4 games. They have a lot of home games where they can make a little bit of a run. Big games against RIT for them. Big games against Minnesota, and their tournament where they got BU, Michigan Tech, and Air Force. So there's a little bit of they're not out. Let's just put it that way. Could they have used to make it to overtime against Denver? Yeah, we determined that, but they're not out of the mix at all.
No, I really love the fact that they don't have a lot of road. In the road games they have they're tough trips, going up to Fairbanks in February and then going up to Anchorage the first week of March. So it's not easy travel. That's probably the 2 toughest trips, and they probably have the toughest road schedule in terms of where they've had to go this season. But I think that the fact that they have so many home games, they're playing really well at Mullet. So I think that if they can put themselves on a run here, games, you pointed out UNH, that's a road game. You need to take those because UNH is right now in the bottom 10 of the pairwise, but Boston College,
they have to.
Oh yeah, they have to. Boston College has been pushing themselves up there. So that's the New Year's Eve weekend. They get those 2 at home. Their tournament, you mentioned those teams. Then Minnesota State, who knows where Minnesota State ends up at the end, but they're more likely than not to be a quality-ish win. RIT's had a good season thus far. You don't have a lot of hay to make after that. Once they've played RIT, they have no room for error. 0 losses. They lose a game after the RIT weekend on January 21st, and you can kind of write off Arizona State because they have 2 against St. Thomas, 2 against Alaska, 2 against Lindenwood, 2 against Alaska again, 2 against Alaska Anchorage, and then 2 against LIU. If you don't, maybe I'll give you 1 ounce of slack and you can come out of that 11-1, but you really need to go 12-0 if you're Arizona State on the end of that schedule.
And in today's college hockey world, that's not a given, even as good as Arizona State is. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, and it's probably a good place to wrap up so we can catch our breath and go on about our business. But Weekend Review from USCHO is sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org and find our podcasts at uscho.com/podcasts. For Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Weekend Review.